My guest this week is the primatologist Dr. Jane Goodall. Famed for her work on noting the connection between chimpanzees and humans, she now travels the world with her educational programme and her message. Next stop is Arizona. Aged 88, she's not slowing down, and she describes herself now as an environmental activist. But don't expect her to be lying down in the middle of a road and stopping traffic anytime soon. Jane, welcome to the programme. Thank you so much for being with me and with all of us. You made some very important discoveries about chimpanzees early on in your career, which really made your name. And I wanted to start our conversation today by asking, what do you think we need to remember about what you've learned and what's been discovered since, about our similarities as species, perhaps?
Well, I think the most important thing that I can say is that, genetically, the composition of DNA of humans and chimpanzees differs by only just over 1%. So biologically, they're our closest living relative, along with the bonobo. And then behaviorally, kissing, embracing, holding hands, patting one another, the relationship between mothers and their growing offspring, which can last throughout a life of up to about 65 years in the wild. And unfortunately, they have a dark and aggressive side, just like us, and they're capable of a kind of primitive war and killing. But just like us, they have a loving, compassionate, and truly altruistic side. So in all those ways, it's very clear, and became clear to scientists, that we are part of the animal kingdom, and not, as was said in the early 60s, completely separated. And the chimpanzees really have helped us to understand our position in relation to the rest of the animals, that we're part of and not separate from the animal kingdom.
And is that the point of trying to understand how we are similar, that we don't see ourselves as distinct? Why is that important?
Well, because once people decide that animals are mere things, as was thought, then the way that they're treated can be extremely inhumane. And as we know now, we're in the midst of the 6th great extinction, and in many places, animal lives are not valued. But then we have to remember that in many places, human lives are not valued either. And I think the one thing that we have to think about is that the biggest difference between us and chimpanzees and other animals is the explosive development of our intellect. So it doesn't make sense, does it, that the most intellectual creature to ever walk on planet Earth is destroying its only home. And it seems to me there is some disconnect between the clever brain and the human heart, where poetically we seek love and compassion. And I truly believe when head and heart work in harmony, can we humans attain our true potential. And our true potential is huge.
Just to go to that point of love and our similarity with chimpanzees when it comes to our relationships, there is this video, this recent footage of a baby chimp that's gone viral. The baby had to be put on oxygen for a few days after being born. And it's a video of it being reintroduced to its mother for the first time. I know you've had a look at this clip. It's really moving. I say that as someone who's nearly 8 months pregnant as well, but just watching the interaction when they're reunited of the mother, how quick she is. What did you take from it?
Well, I was very moved by watching that. And clearly when the mother comes in, she's not sure what's happening. She's been separated from her baby at birth. I believe it was a cesarean. And then suddenly you see the infant move and the arm reaches up. And the reaction of the rapid response of the mother, the speed with which she moves over and just so tenderly cradles that infant in her arms. And she's so excited that she's kind of rocking, but very gently, because she doesn't want to disturb this precious little life that she has created. And I think it gives us a window into the chimpanzee mentality, the way that she just relates, as I say, to that newborn infant is incredible.
Does it bring back memories, good memories for you about working with the chimpanzees and being with them every day and studying them up close?
Well, during those amazing years, the best in my life, I was learning something almost every day. And I saw the whole gamut of emotions, you know, the loving and caring side, and also the violent and aggressive side. I saw the tenderness of mothers and the older siblings towards newborn babies. I also saw some females who cannibalized newborn babies of other females in their group, which still doesn't make any sense to us. And so when you're watching chimpanzees, you run through the same contradictions in behavior that we see when we're looking at human beings, because we too behave in unpredictable ways.
Well, I know that you have focused your work of late more away from animals towards people, towards the environment. Why did you make that move?
Because in 1986, I helped to put together a conference in Chicago, actually, and by that time, there were 6 different field study sites studying chimpanzees. When I began, it was just me, but by 1986, there were other people out there in the field. And the aim of it was to see, how does chimpanzee behavior differ or not in one environment to another? But during that 4-day conference, in which we learned a lot about, you know, chimpanzee culture, we also had a session on conservation. And it was absolutely shocking to see right across the chimp range, chimp numbers were dropping, forests were being destroyed. It was the beginning of the bushmeat trade, killing mothers to steal babies for the international trade in wild animals, for entertainment, zoos, and in those days, for medical research. By then, I'd magically obtained my PhD, in spite of never having been to college, but I left as an activist.
And we're talking now just after the latest COP27 Global Climate Summit of, you know, most of the world's leaders. Am I finding you in an optimistic or a pessimistic place after that?
Well, I've attended some of those COP climate change conferences. And, you know, if countries live up to the pledges that they make and the commitments that they talk about, and the eloquent way that they say they understand that we must keep the rise in temperature under 1.5, and I've heard some people now saying 2 degrees. If these pledges were kept, but there has been a history of pledges being made and not kept. So all I can say is I have my fingers crossed. There's no question awareness about the danger of climate change and loss of biodiversity, because these two go together. And, you know, we depend on the natural world for food, water, clothing, air, everything. But we depend on healthy ecosystems. And an ecosystem is made up of this complex mix of animal and plant species. It's like a glorious tapestry, but they're all interrelated. So as one species becomes extinct in a particular ecosystem, it's like pulling a thread from the tapestry. And if enough threads are pulled, the tapestry will hang in tatters and the ecosystem will collapse.
I mean, you say you have your fingers crossed. I know you like to be an optimist from all you've said, and you actually say that's a key part of, you know, going and keeping going with the work that you do. But saying you've got your fingers crossed after this meeting, it doesn't sound that hopeful. I mean, you sound like you want to hope, but not necessarily that you believe these leaders will keep to the pledges.
Well, that is where we move away from the leaders and turn to the people. So that my main reasons for hope, we, the Jane Goodall Institute, we have a program for young people from kindergarten through university and beyond. It's in 66 countries and growing. Hundreds and thousands of young people. They care, they get it. Many, many of them are taking action about climate change and all of these issues that are so devastating at the time. But they care, and they not only care and say that they care, but they roll up their sleeves and they take action because they get to choose the projects that they work on. And they work on projects to help people, to help animals, and to help the environment.
I was going to say, if you're watching this and you haven't rolled up your sleeves and maybe you're out of the education system and you're thinking, what can I do? What's the one thing you think more people could do easily?
Well, easily they could move towards a plant-based diet. Easily they could try and eliminate plastics from their lives. Easily they could, for different people it's different things. Some people want to help immigrant children, for example. And because it's all interrelated, all these problems we face today, we need people to tackle them all. So what I feel very, very strongly, yes, there is indeed hope for the future, but there's a but. There's a window of time when we can slow down climate change, we can slow down loss of biodiversity, we can improve healthcare, we can alleviate poverty, which is a great driver of destruction of the environment as people try to live. But there's a but, and the but is we can do this, but we all need to take action. We must stop relying on governments. And the good news, the big corporations are beginning to change.
But Jane, what do you say to people who say things like, well, while big countries like China are not meeting these sorts of commitments, these sorts of pledges, not changing their economies enough to be different. I know you're talking about coming away from leaders. I'm not going to bother. It makes no difference if I don't recycle. It makes no difference if I eat less meat. What do you say to those people who don't have that optimism because they look at the countries and the leaders who are not doing what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And isn't there an expression that's all over the place saying, think globally, act locally? It's the wrong way round. Because if you think globally, as you say, we get depressed. And you cannot look around at what's happening in the world today, politically, socially, environmentally, and not feel a deep depression. But what I say to those people is, stop thinking globally. You can't do anything globally, but think in your own community. What can I do? What do you care about? Go, inspire others, get to work, roll up your sleeves, do something. And that makes people feel good.
I wanted to ask, you said you left that meeting in the 80s an activist. There are a new generation, as there always are, but there are at the moment, of environmental activists. For instance, in the UK, Just Stop Oil, the Sunrise Movement in America. There are mixed views of that as a way of trying to change people's minds and the messages. Of course, in some instances, people have been stopped from going to medical appointments, funerals. They've had their lives disrupted. That's what protests are meant to do. How do you view that type of activism at the moment that you'll be aware of?
I think it's a huge mistake. It's alienating people who otherwise care. It makes them angry. And it tends to make people think about all of us who care about climate change in a very negative way, sort of branded like, the old tree hugger type. And so I can understand their anger, but I cannot condone their methods. I mean, here you have maybe hundreds and hundreds of people who are doing their best, trying to live lives that are more in harmony with the natural world, and they can't get home to supper, they can't pick up their children, because you've got these ridiculous activists blocking the road or chaining themselves to posts and things like that. So for me, that is not the right way. I can understand their anger, but it's misdirected, I believe.
Would you go as far as calling those activists, as some politicians have, would you call them criminals?
No, I wouldn't go so far as to call them criminals. They're just, I don't know, they're thinking wrongly. They're not taking, and that's the problem. If you think of our species at the mouth of a very long, very dark tunnel, and right at the end there's a little shining light, that's hope. And between us and that shining light, there are all these obstacles, the ones that I've mentioned. So it's no good sitting at the mouth of the tunnel and saying, I hope that light comes to us soon. No. We have to roll up those sleeves and crawl under, climb over, and work around all those obstacles lying between us and the star. And yes, there are people working on every single one of the problems mentioned and not mentioned. but too often they tend to work in their own little narrow tunnel. And if you don't see the picture as a whole, you may succeed in your goal, but that may cause problems elsewhere.
Can I ask you a very, very random question just at this point? Is it right, what I've read, that you were presented as a debutante at Buckingham Palace at the last one of those kind of events held there? Is that right?
At a debutante, yes, because my uncle who had money wanted me presented. We had no money. We had to scrounge around, Mum and I, in second-hand shops to find something suitable to wear. And I was lined up with all these other debutantes ready for the season, which is basically a marriage market.
Yeah.
And, you know, they were saying to me that their ambition was to be a lady in waiting to the Queen. And when I said, no, I want to go to Africa and live with wild animals, they avoided me. I mean, it was like I was shunned like a pariah.
Well, it's quite a memory, I'm sure. Because, I mean, and you used to travel with your mum, didn't you?
Well, only because, I mean, the first time I went to Africa, I was on my own. And then when Louis Leakey asked me to study the chimps, Tanzania was Tanganyika, part of the crumbling British Empire, and the British authorities refused permission to take responsibility for a young girl going out into the forest alone. They said, no, 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 and in the end they said, yes, but she cannot come alone. And Mum volunteered to come.
Wow. I bet that was quite something for her as well.
Well, people say I was brave. She was brave. She stayed down in the camp. You know, there were spiders and scorpions and snakes and buffaloes came by, and we had one cook, and he very quickly found a frightfully alcoholic beverage made of fermented bananas. So he was slightly inebriated half the time. I was up in the hills doing what I dreamed of doing since I was 10.
That's amazing. It's amazing that she supported you like that and that you were able to do that.
I wouldn't be who I am. I mean, when I was 10 and had this dream of Africa, because I was in love with Tarzan, everybody laughed and said, you'll never get to Africa, it's far away, you don't have money, World War II was raging, and you're just a girl. But what my mother said was, if you really want to do this, you're going to have to work terribly hard, take advantage of every opportunity, and then if you don't give up, hopefully you find a way. And that message I've told to young people all around the world, particularly in disadvantaged communities. And I wish Mum was around to hear how many people have said, Jane, I want to thank you because you've taught me that because you did it, I can do it too.
That's incredible. It's really incredible. I mean, and you were a very rare as a woman, as a young woman in that space. But I've read you also found that to your advantage in some ways. You've taken it in good humour, especially when some comments, I believe, were made about your legs being helpful.
Well, back then, you know, it was a different world. Like, if somebody made that comment today, oh, Jane only got onto the Geographic cover and famous and money because of her legs, it would probably be cause for a lawsuit. Back then, I just said, well, if indeed my legs have got me money to study the chimpanzees, thank you, legs.
It's probably the only way to deal with it back then, like you say, where things were said that would not be said in the same way, or certainly received in the same way as they are now. I also liked just reading in terms of your life and your ability to connect with people, that pre-pandemic, is it right, you hadn't slept in the same bed for more than 3 weeks since 1986 because of your travel commitments, meeting friends and people around the world?
That's absolutely true. And because during the pandemic, I was grounded at home in Bournemouth, where I'm speaking from Bournemouth now. And it's the longest I've been at home. It's the house I grew up in, by the way, where me and my sister are and her family. It's the longest I've been there since I left school. But it was more exhausting than all that traveling because I could do up to 4 Zooms, virtual lectures and interviews and things like this every day. My voice got exhausted, it's changed. And, you know, there was no respite. There was no day off, not one in 2.5 years, no holiday. And so the advantage was that I was able to reach literally millions, several million more people in that way than by traveling and talking in the different countries. And so the idea was, after the pandemic, we'll do more of the static Zooming and less of the travel. But it turns out that I'm doing as much travel and the Zooms. So I'm doubly exhausted.
You doubled up there with some of the load. What do you make about travel, as that being one of the things people are trying to cut down, or one of the things they try and control? How do you reconcile that?
Well, first of all, our Roots and Shoots groups are planting literally millions and millions of trees. Secondly, if my arrival in a place didn't make a big difference, I wouldn't do it. But it does. So many people have said, well, Jane, it's wonderful when you Zoom and things, but when you come, we get the kind of inspiration we don't get in any other way. So although I'm on these planes, I'm not on a private plane. I'm on a plane that's going anyway. We haven't got to the stage of, slowing down our travel, which probably is a pity. But since I'm making a difference and hopefully helping to make the world a better place, then I can live with it.
Do you think we shouldn't have private jets?
No. I mean, I think for some businesses, it's almost necessary, especially now, post-pandemic. The air travel is, you get flights cancelled, you get flights delayed, you can't make your connection.
So are you going to tell some of the celebrities and some of the leaders who follow your work and you get to have audiences with, or they have audiences with you, to stop using the private jets, the PJs?
No, I'm not going to tell them. People need to, I've never been one to confront people, because I think the only way that you can create change in some of these people is not to argue with them, not to tell them what they should or shouldn't do, but to reach the heart. And how do you reach the heart? By telling stories. And there's one story which I'll share with you now. It was a CEO of a big international company, and he was telling me that for the last 8 years, he's been really trying to get his company to have ethical practices in all the different countries for 3 reasons. One, seeing the writing on the wall, using up natural resources, in some cases faster than nature can replenish them. Secondly, consumer pressure. People who can afford it are beginning to demand products that have been made ethically. But he said what tipped the balance was my little girl of 8 came back from school one day and she said, "Daddy, they tell me that what you're doing is hurting the planet. That's not true, is it, Daddy? Because it's my planet."
Dr. Goodall, thank you very much for your time.
Well, thank you too. And just remember, every single day we live, every one of us makes an impact, and we get to choose what sort of impact we make.
A very powerful message to end on. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for being with us. Until we meet again, take care and goodbye.